for coming back for episode 2 of the Plastic Posse Podcast. We want to thank everybody who listened to episode 1 and also especially those that gave us feedback on our Facebook page. Had a really good reaction to it. Feedback was overwhelmingly positive, so thanks to all, and we hope you enjoy episode 2 even more. Couple things to talk about here before we get going. We have a new friend over in Ireland. His name is Warren Sterrett, and he's put together an initiative called the Golden Sprue Awards, which you can find at www.goldensprueawards.com. He was featured on the Bench and also the Plastic Model Mojo podcast, so you can listen to those recent episodes and kind of hear some of the specifics. He's a scale modeler, and he's put together a way for modelers to nominate their favorite new kits in different genres, favorite manufacturers, favorite other categories like favorite paint, those kind of things. And so we want to really help him out and support him in this. He wants to, if he can get enough support behind it, make it kind of an annual thing. He's got built into it a little bit of a motivation. If you enter some nominations and you can put in your email and be entered into a random drawing for some nice prizes that they're giving away. Everybody head on over to www.goldensprueawards.com and let's support Warren in this effort. It should be a lot of fun. But we've got a lot to talk about today. We've got some great listener feedback, and to start things off, we have a really awesome surprise. We're very, very excited to introduce this episode's special guest host, our newest honorary posse member, direct from Melbourne, Australia, the Godfather of Scale Modeling Podcasts. From On the Bench, welcome, Dave.
What a great intro. Thanks, guys. Hey, I've never been a member of a posse before, so this is quite exciting for me because, you know, when I was a kid on Saturday afternoons, used to have cowboy shows to watch on TV, and I've always wanted to be part of a posse. So do I get a badge and a gun?
We'll work on that. I don't, you know, your import folks might have a problem with the gun, but we could at least maybe get you a hat and a badge. What do you think, guys?
I think that's a great idea.
Well, since Dave is unencumbered from Ian and Julian this week, hey guys, hopefully we can talk to you sometime soon. Wanted to start off, Dave, with finding out where On the Bench started. I think you've been going since 2017. You guys are nearing 100 episodes, which is just fantastic. Tell us, how did On the Bench start?
Well, 2017 is just so long ago now. It's funny, it started because I found podcasts, and I used to drive. I got tired of listening to radio when I was driving in the car. I thought, gee, wouldn't it be great to have a podcast on plastic models? So I started looking through, and there was nothing there. So what do you do when you can't find something that you want? You start it up and you build it yourself, and that's what we did. We ended up starting the podcast. Originally, it was just me and Ian, and we had Julian on as a special guest for a couple of episodes, and that dynamic worked really well. And so Julian ended up being part of the gang, and so we just kept on going. But gee, it's funny, you know, nearly 100 episodes. I go back and I listen to the first couple of episodes. I just cringe at how bad we were back then. It's a real laugh to hear how, you know. And yet now we seem to have we've got a fantastic following. I mean, you know, we've just tipped over 200,000 downloads, which is really
wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, you guys have Patreon supporters, got sponsors. You guys have really broken a lot of ground for certainly scale modeling podcasts and maybe podcasts in general. What's the plastic modeling community in Australia like? You know, are there a lot of clubs over there? Is there a lot of participation?
Yeah, there's a lot of participation, and in fact and I'm going to probably upset the rest of Australia when I say this, but the biggest modelling show actually happens here in Melbourne. Fortunately, it didn't happen this year due to COVID, but they get about 800 entries with about 2,000 models that are displayed, which is pretty good.
Yeah, that's really good.
3 days. Nice. We're really blessed down here, particularly in Melbourne, but certainly around the country. I've got within an hour and a half drive of my home location, I've got 15 model shops to choose from.
Oh, wow.
Man.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly better than here in the States.
Well, that's not even including the ones that are in the country locations as well. If I throw that blanket to about a 2-hour drive, I'll perhaps put another 3 or 4 model shops into that one as well. So, and that's not counting the specialist model shops that are devoted to, say, Warhammer, that genre, we're really blessed out here. And so to support that many shop is definitely a huge, huge, huge group of modelers here.
Have you been to any shows here in the States before?
No, I haven't. So, and it's funny you should ask that. We were talking as we were sort of getting set up for the show this afternoon or tonight. And Dave from the other podcast from Plastic Model Mojo, he's really been riding me about perhaps getting up to Las Vegas. This is a special announcement on your show. I'm actually going to endeavour to get to Las Vegas in 2021 for the big IPMS show.
Oh, that's
Wonderful.
fantastic. That is great news. You guys heard it here first from Dave. When you do come over, we're all planning on being down there, COVID permitting. We definitely will have to get together and do some co-podcasting. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Of course, the only rider I've got to put on that is if there's some type of vaccine or something, because at the moment, our government won't let us travel overseas at the moment until everything's sort of sorted out. But I'm pretty confident by the time we get round to August next year, things will be sorted out.
Absolutely.
Going back to On the Bench, do you have any plans or anything that you guys are wanting to talk about yet for big episode number 100, or any new changes to your podcast?
No real big changes. The formula works, so we're pretty happy to leave it as it is. The only frustrating thing is because of COVID, we're not in the studio together. I think the show bounces off each other a lot better when you're all sort of face to face, because, we can sit here and chuck pens at each other and do that sort of stuff. And of course, the boys are really used to coming over to my place because my lovely wife, Michelle, cooks them up a really big breakfast. So I sort of wheel them into the studio after that, and they're groaning and full of bacon and eggs and coffee. Yeah, so moving forward to our 100th episode, I've really been racking my brains over that. I've been thinking about doing a live type show, but that won't work because 75% of our audience is all overseas, so that make it a bit harder, all different sort of time zones and everything. I might just go back and just get a whole heap of people who've been on the show before and get them just to drop in and say good day. We'll see how that sort of works, how it pans out and works.
Well, make sure you celebrate. That's quite an accomplishment. We're here on episode number 2, and we can definitely appreciate the work that goes into actually putting out 100 episodes of content. So just congratulations again.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, guys. And congratulations on your first show. It was a good one.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's very, very kind. And, just so everybody knows out there, Dave's been incredibly supportive answered lots and lots of questions, helped promote us. You've been integral in our launch and just very appreciative of that. Dave, we want to make sure that you feel comfortable, so strap yourself in. We want you to be a full participant on this show. We're going to get going here. Feel free to jump in, and I know our listeners are going to really enjoy that. We got a bunch of listener feedback this week. Why don't we start talking about some of that?
All right. First of all, let me tell you, I'm Doug. Somebody forgot to introduce myself on our other co-host over there in Virginia. That's TJ. TJ, welcome.
Yeah. How you guys doing?
Sorry, guys.
I just and just to add something, TJ is from Virginia, and everybody knows Virginia is for lovers.
It is. It's on our license plates.
All right, let's get into listener feedback. We've got a few. There's actually quite a bit, and the few that were early on, and we're going to share these. Chris McLean, he chimed in, wanted to let us know how much he enjoyed episode 1, and he really appreciates that we're talking Warhammer and gaming miniatures and things like that. His entry point into the hobby was Warhammer. He even went and shared some of his photos to our Facebook page, so if you'd like to see those, feel free to check it out.
Let me chime in on that. Chris's miniatures were awesome. They were, the ones he showed us were from I think it's Lord of the Rings strategy battle game. I can't remember exactly what it's called. It's Lord of the Rings themed, and they were the Rohirrim, and they were really, really cool.
They were really good. Absolutely. Alan Morrell, he wanted to let us know that he enjoyed our episode, and he asked how we think that podcasts can benefit the modeling community. What do y'all think?
Yeah, sure. I'll chime in there. First of all, I've met Alan when I was up in Canada, and he is a true gentleman of the hobby. You couldn't come across a nicer guy. So how do we think the podcast can benefit the modeling community? It's amazing how many people we get writing in saying that the podcast for them is like their model club because they don't have one close to them. We're playing a very vital role in reaching out to all those people who are isolated, either geographically or for one thing or another. So that's one big tick for what we're doing. The second thing is we're just promoting the hobby itself, anything that promotes the hobby. And that's why I'm sort of jumping up and down and applauding you guys so much, because you're coming into with the gateway drug of Warhammer and Gundam, which obviously leads into bigger and better things for the modelling hobby itself. I think we're all doing our own little thing, and the beauty about podcasting is sort of as close as you can get to radio, live radio, I guess.
Yep.
And unlike YouTube's, where you go really just to listen and see how you do effects, this is a place for us to sort of sit and talk about the actual hobby in as real time as we can get.
What do you guys think? How can these podcasts help the modeling community at large?
I think it's just good. I mean, I just like to talk about what I do. I don't really know how to put it any other way. Sometimes people just want to hear other people talk about the things that they like that they also have in common. Kind of going back to what like Dave was saying, maybe they don't know a lot of people that are into building models. Sometimes it feels like, I don't know, you just feel you like to listen to, people talk about things they really like. And, I think everyone here, we love this hobby like a lot. Like this is one of the only things that I do is build scale models. I may have other hobbies too, but this is my primary one. So to get a chance to talk about that with people, have people listen and give us feedback and interact with us on the internet is awesome. I mean, you can't ask for anything better, I think, and I think that helps people, especially now, reach out to people and be connected.
Well, you know what? It's really funny because until a month ago, I'd never even realized there were modeling podcasts. I mean, it makes sense that there is, but it's such a visual hobby that it didn't cross my mind that I could listen to people talk about it. When Scott approached me about doing this, of course, I started listening to a bunch of them. And what I really appreciate about these shows is I can listen to these guys talk about their love for modeling, and it makes me want to model some more. It kind of, because we all get in those ruts where we don't feel like building. And, we're like, oh, not today. And we do that for days on end. Well, after listening to one of the other shows, On the Bench and Plastic Model Mojo, I just have to get working. I got to get my hands busy. I've got to get my fingers on those models. And that really helps me a ton. And if we can find a way to share that with even more people, then we can get more people working on their stuff.
What a great question.
Yeah, and to kind of circle back on that, I mean, for most people, scale modeling is a solitary exercise, right? I know that some people will come over, go places or have meetups and do building. I know there's a Gundam Builders Club near where I live, but for most people, like I can't really travel with my modeling stuff. I have 3 desks full of stuff. Like how, I can't take all that stuff with me. So podcast kind of, it's a way to make it seem like not a isolated activity. And I think that is pretty powerful.
What other feedback did we get?
Well, we got a few things from Ray Davis. David, you know Ray, right? He's from Sydney, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah, he's a real kook, so I wouldn't read anything out that he's got to say.
All righty.
He had a couple questions and a tip. His first question is about lighting up sci-fi models. He says he has an old Revell Colonial Viper that he made many years ago, and he wants to know, it was the very first model that he'd ever used weathering on. He says, I would really love to find out how I can refurbish it and light it up. Anybody have any ideas on that?
The Colonial Viper is the coolest model ever. I mean, that's what got me into modeling. That's a great place to start. As far as lighting it, I have purchased lighting kits for my Viper models, and so you can certainly look at purchasing. If you have the experience, you can do your own lighting, wire up your own LEDs and switches and resistors and, those kinds of things. And I think a great suggestion here would be check out YouTube. Doug pointed me to a video by a user named Interstellar Modeler, and he has a pretty good little video there about lighting it up, but there's a lot of stuff on there. Dave, any experience lighting up any of your models?
No, it's something I want to do for particularly a couple of aircraft carriers I've got sitting around, so I wouldn't mind having a crack at it one day. Sounds like a really good subject for a future podcast, guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you say light up an aircraft carrier, like inside so you can see the details in the hangars and those kinds of things?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And when you build an aircraft carrier, the 1/200 scale or 1/350 scale, things get pretty dark in there unless you get it lit up. So the only way to sort of display all the aircraft and all the equipment in the hangar decks is to actually put lighting in there. And quite a few people have done it quite successfully. I don't really understand electricity. I mean, you can't see it, touch it, taste it, or smell it. So to me, it's sort of like the dark magic, and I've sort of been a bit weary or leery of actually doing any work in that area. But it's something I want to do into the future. Back to Ray's question where he's asking whether he should crack the old model open and sort of redo it. I'd be saying go and buy a new Colonial Viper and start from scratch, because it's going to be pretty hard to retrofit all the lighting, and you're going to ruin potentially an old historic model
Right.
that you've built in the past. And so I'd start from scratch.
It would be some surgery to cut it open and get all the electronics in there, especially if you want to work on the cockpit, because then you're getting up in that fuselage where it's really, really tight.
If you can get a hold of a Moebius Colonial Viper Mark I, that's going to be a model that's a lot easier to light. There's a lot more room inside that model. There's just a little bit more space inside too. And so that would back Dave's point up of getting a new kit and using that to light it up. And then, like Dave mentioned, you'd have your old one that you use for the first time weathering. And, it's great to keep builds like that, because I think they remind you how far that you've come in the hobby. I mean, that's how I feel. TJ, what about you? Have you ever lit up any of your models?
I've tried to light a 1/350th scale Bandai Millennium Falcon. I mean, I am no electrical engineer at all, and I had to learn a lot of it as I was doing it, and I got it to work. And except for one of my solder joints, I used SMDs for the engines, and one of my solder joints failed, and that was it. I got mad and was like, yeah, we're done with this. And I think I have it somewhere. I might have thrown it away. I don't remember, but
well, in 1/350th scale, that thing fits in the palm of your hand. So
yeah, it's really
that's
tiny.
A pretty tall order to light that thing up.
Yes, seriously. Do you have a microscope on your bench, buddy? That's awesome. You deserve a medal for bravery for that kind of an effort. Doug, what about you? Have you lit any kit?
The only lighting I've ever done, it's on the last kit that I finished, was my Bandai B-Wing, and it came with a little light. It's just a little drop-in 3-volt battery, watch battery size. It drops in behind the engines. You can pull out the engines, turn it on, put it back in, and it lights up. They're actually really neat, but there was no skill involved in wiring that sucker up.
Hopefully that answers Ray's first question. What's his next question?
He wants to know about making his own decals. He says, I think a lot of people, especially those new to modeling, would love to know that it is possible to make custom decals for their kits. Scott wanted to say something about stencils in this spot, I think.
Just to reiterate what I mentioned in the first podcast, and what will undoubtedly be reiterated over and over, Scott hates decals. I would do anything not to decal a kit. Now, obviously, sometimes, stencils are so tiny, or you've got a piece of artwork like nose art on an aircraft, for instance, where you've really got to use a decal. But anytime, like on a Colonial Viper, this is a great example, you could mask those stripes on that model and airbrush those. So if you've got the ability to do that, maybe consider that. You can either do that manually, like with some Tamiya tape or some pinstriping tape. If you know somebody with one of these new cutter machines like Silhouettes or Crickets, my wife has one of those, and she kind of gets tired of me. I'll get a kit. The first thing I do is I take her the decal sheet and ask her to scan it, and then clean the artwork up so that I can cut stencils for it. Anyway, that's always an option, but let's answer the question, who's got experience making custom decals for their kit?
I've tried one time and I was not successful. I know it's possible. I've watched a couple YouTube videos on it. That's how I decided to try it, and I thought I did everything right, but I didn't, and it didn't work. What you can also do, and what I would probably recommend, is there are people out there that will make custom decals for you that have good, like, high quality printers. I think they're like Alps printers that can like print white, and a lot of times it's really not that expensive, so that's something I would look into. I mean, I know for like wargaming and stuff, there's quite a few people out there that will make custom decals for like, the little figures or whatever, but I'm sure most of those people would make anything you sent them.
Dave, can you bail us inexperienced Yanks out on this point?
No, doing decals is another form of witchcraft, so more power to those.
We're going to move on a little bit. He has a tip for us, another one from Ray, about stripping paint back to bare plastic without damaging it. That use a 50-50 solution of water and Dettol. That Dettol, is that how we pronounce it, David?
Yeah, Dettol, that's fine.
Which is Lysol or Pine Sol in the USA. Leave the model in a big enough container and submerge it overnight. Use a toothbrush to scrub the excess paint while submerged in the solution. Then rinse it under cold water. It works on both acrylic and enamel paint. Thank you very much for that tip.
That's handy.
Yeah, that's great.
I've never stripped paint off or taken it back to bare plastic. If a model doesn't work, it ends up in a bin, otherwise known as the well of tears. I just haven't got the time. I mean, once I become frustrated with a model, that's it. It goes. And I'll go and start another project. I'm not going to bother and strip back and start again.
Oh, man. Well,
sounds like me.
It sounds like you're a lot better modeler than I am, but I know stripping paint very, very well.
So moving on, Jason Gambrell writes in to say he's looking forward to the podcast and he'd like to hear a discussion on sci-fi properties like Gundam, Star Wars, Star Trek, Space 2001, and even some anime properties like Macross. That's coming. We're going to be talking about that stuff a lot. He'd also like to see and hear a beginner's guide to the hobby. Actually, that's perfect because that's one of the things we want to focus on. Thanks, Jason. Josh Buck wrote in to say it would be cool to hear from folks that made models from ships from sci-fi movies that didn't have mass run kits. He also sent some pics of his bench and aircraft models. Another thing that we would like to discuss in the future. Anybody that has any ideas for what they would like to hear, feel free to tell us because we would like to know. We would like to give you all what you want to hear.
Yeah, one of the kits that I know Doug has often wanted is the ship from the Last Gunstar. Last Starfighter, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, that would be awesome to see that. Any sci-fi subjects that we don't have mass produced models of that you guys would like to see?
I think we talked about it. It might have been off the air one time. The shuttle.
Oh, yeah, the shuttle.
Yeah. Just the Imperial shuttle. I would love 72nd scale if possible. Kit nice. From that. I would settle for a 144th 1/144th scale, but if Bandai does it, I would be eternally grateful because that is such a cool looking little spacecraft.
Well, there was a kit made a long time ago, and it was enormous, and it was very difficult to make work.
The old MPC kit.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I think we all just got a shiver on the back of our necks. Dave, do you do any sci-fi modeling? Anything that you're keen to maybe have a go at?
Yeah, look, I do some sci-fi stuff. I've got some Bandai Star Wars kits floating around and a couple of odd Japanese kits also floating around from some anime series, I think. I think mostly you can get a model of whatever you've seen on the TV show or a movie somewhere, even if it's 3D printed or being done in resin. So there is a cottage industry out there that caters for it, but you've really got to dig right down into the specialist areas of that particular TV show or movie, or indeed the modeling community to sort of find it. It's not easy to find necessarily, but they are out there.
I think that's a great point. I've just recently obtained a 1/20th scale of the Thunder Fighter from the old 70s Buck Rogers in the 25th Century series. That is a great kit, 3D printed from a model maker out of Canada named Elaine Rivard. And he has just announced a 1/48 scale Clone Wars Y-Wing, which is an earlier version of the Y-Wing that is seen in the movies from the Clone Wars cartoons, and it's quite a bit different, and I'm going to pick one of those up as well. So Dave's got a great point. If you look on Facebook and look around, there's quite a bit of model makers out there that are making resin kits, limited run kits, 3D printed kits, and of course there's always more and more coming out of Japan. If it's anime, you can probably find a Japanese kit of it somewhere.
We got a couple of shout outs. One from Tom Stewart telling us what a great podcast it was, and hard to believe it was our first. As I stumble over my words, it's hard to believe that was our first too. Steve Schaefer also wrote in. He said, I just finished listening to and you guys did fantastic. I'd never guess it was your first time. You're very down to earth, and you have a very down to earth way of talking about the hobby. Hell, I even dig your theme music. Well, thank you very much. We bought that ourselves.
Yes.
I love hearing that there are still things that intimidate others in the hobby too. Great interview and great show. Nice job. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Welcome to the posse, and thank you for the feedback.
Please, as Doug mentioned, continue to comment. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like, what you'd like us to talk about. Come on in and participate. Be a member of the posse. And like Dave, we'll see if we can maybe send you a hat or a badge.
I have to invest in cowboy hats, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, just a badge would be fine. A nice badge saying you're part of the posse would be awesome.
That would be great. We got to work on that.
So what's on everyone's bench? I know on my bench I still have the Tamiya KB1 since last we passed this station, still in the exact same spot that it was the last time I talked about it. But you know what? That's not true. I think I bumped it yesterday when I was getting something that was behind it, but it more or less is in the same spot. I also have a ironclad dreadnought for my Space Marine army for 40K. It's all beat up and kind of cool looking. I normally don't weather my gaming figures because I don't feel like taking the time to do it, but this guy, he looked like he needed it. And then I have his big brother that I've got primed up, and I'm also going to weather him, so I've got a chipping coat down on him. I have a big, huge hovering tank that I've half primed, that I'll probably finish priming after we finish recording this. What about you, Scott? What do you got?
Well, before I get to that, I just want to kind of kick it back to TJ. Check out our Facebook page, all you listeners out there, and check out this piece that I call it Stompy McStomperson, because I don't know the Warhammer lingo yet and whatever. But when TJ says it's kind of cool, it's a beautiful piece. And I think, Dave, you even commented online about it. The weathering on it and everything is really beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. It's an uber cool kit. It's really been very well painted and built. So
thank you.
I was drooling over it when I looked at it there. I love the olive the olive drab you got in there. It just looks gorgeous.
Thanks.
And then also, you didn't mention it, but I wanted to give you a chance here to discuss. You were doing some miniature painting for a charity that you're involved with. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Oh, yeah. I forgot to mention that. So there's a guy named Scott who has a YouTube channel called Miniac. He's Scott the Miniature Maniac. He's a really talented painter. Recently, he crossed 100,000 subs on YouTube, which is impressive, I think.
Nice.
For anybody, let alone someone that, does something as obscure as this. So he decided to put together a charity for the Nova Open Charitable Foundation, which is the charitable arm of a local gaming convention here in the Northern Virginia area that started, like most conventions did, really small, like literally in the guy's backyard, and now is probably the largest gaming miniature and tabletop gaming convention on the East Coast. Unfortunately, it was not held this year, like most things, but they continue to hold their auctions, so people donate miniatures, and all the way from single, most like the best painted miniature, like works of art miniatures that are only for display, to functional armies for various games. Well, Scott decided, he teamed up with them, the Nova Open Charitable Foundation, and they put together 4 armies for Warhammer 40,000, and he did a video about it, and you could sign up to paint like a squad of Space Marines or a tank for whatever particular army. So I signed up to paint a squad of Sisters of Battle, which are essentially female Space Marines. That's kind of what I would call them. They're cool. They're a little bit smaller than a normal Space Marine, but so I'm looking forward to that. I've got, I think, 5 weeks to do it, maybe 6 weeks. So it's only 10 figures, and it's kind of not necessarily a speed paint, but it's not, you don't have to paint it to like display quality as long as it's looks nice. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So probably get started on that with the coming weekend, because those of us in the United States, we have Labor Day. I want to say this coming weekend, so I'll have a 3-day weekend, and I'll probably knock out most of it then. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Scott. I forgot about that.
As you're painting those, put some updates on the page so we can check it out. I really like your painting, and excited to see what those look like.
Oh yeah, these girls will be cool. They're in a red and black color scheme, so it's pretty stark. I think it's gonna be really neat.
Well, as far as my modeling goes, I'm still working on that little polar light Shenzhou. I'm gonna walk back. It hasn't been my favorite kit. It's 26 parts. It's not great plastic. It's really all about the decals, which everybody knows how much I love those. I'm doing that in the spirit. In episode 1, we talked quite several times about modeling outside our comfort zone, and so I've been doing this project just to do something I'm uncomfortable with, which is decaling. The entire finish of this little starship is all in the decals. There's Aztecing and all these different panels. There's 2 great big huge decal sheets with the kit, so I'm about halfway done through the decaling phase of that, and I gotta say, for what it is, it doesn't look too bad. So when I'm done with that, I'll pop a couple of little pictures out on our Facebook page and let you guys decide and see what you think.
I have got on my bench 2 things that I've worked on since the last time I checked in. One is the Warhammer 40K Lehman Russ battle tank that my son asked me to build for him. I've gotten it to paint, sealed that paint, and I've been throwing a little muck on it, and I'm going to get into chipping probably tonight. I also have the Tamiya 135th scale Sherman Easy 8, and that's at the same spot. I actually have both of those ready to start dirtying up, chipping a little bit. I won't go too heavy on the chipping with the Sherman. You just don't see too much of that on the Shermans. That's where I'm at, and I'm having fun with this. I also have that Gundam that I've got. I haven't really done anything with that since we talked last.
The hella good Gundam,
whatever it's called. I don't know what it's called. I got to learn this stuff, man.
Hey, don't those Warhammer Warhammer kits are really cool to build, aren't they? You just sort of slap them together. You don't really have to worry about too much about the seams because all the joy and fun is in the painting and the weathering.
It really is. And I was saying, I think I said last time, they have one drawback, which is in a lot of cases, there's no aligning tabs. So you kind of have to guess sometimes where exactly you want it, but you can make those decisions and move things even in different places, which kind of makes it a little easier to make unique for yourself. So have fun with it.
Yeah.
Is that something, Dave, you might consider sometime, is painting a Warhammer subject, a figure, or a tank, or a vehicle?
I've actually done two. I've
Oh,
done a,
nice.
I think it was a Blood Angels tank of some description, and I did a Blitzer bomber.
Oh, those are cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Those are cool.
Yeah.
And I found actually they were really great to sort of when I lost my mojo and just went out and bought these kits and just dived into them, and it was, you can build with that. The trouble with military builders is sometimes you get so hooked up on making sure the kit's assembled 100% correct with no seams showing, or you got the paint down pat. Whereas if you build something like a Warhammer Blitzer bomb or something like that, you just build it and you just paint it for the heck of it, and it really gets you back into the modeling again. It really gets the creative juices flowing.
Yeah, that's probably the best part about that, because there's no wrong way to paint it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
There
exactly.
just isn't. You can paint it any way you want. It doesn't matter. As exciting as I am, I paint everything olive drab. Let me pick the most bland color on the planet and paint literally everything that.
Well, it's not beige.
Dave, that's a great point. Using maybe a subject or a genre that you're not normally modeling in as a palette cleanser, as a mojo booster, is something that I think is really important for any modeler. Like you said, especially the military modelers, guys that are super passionate. Last time we had an interview with John Bonani, and he's an armor builder, and he mentioned this, and he said, I built a Yog Tiger, and it was 331, and it's a really very famous tank. It's very well photographed, very well documented, and I just pour my heart and soul into getting every color and shade exactly right, pouring over the photos. And what a great break to take a Warhammer subject or whatever it may be, and just build a kit kind of for the fun of it and just enjoy the experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Dave, what is on your bench?
Well, I'm going on a real space kick at the moment. So currently on my bench, I've got a 1/72 scale Mercury Redstone. I've just finished building the Mercury capsules, a couple of them, and it's just a real lot of fun, and I'm enjoying it. And I'm spending heaps of money buying kits I didn't know existed to sort of round out the collection and the build.
Nice.
So yeah, it's just really, really cool, and it's just really getting me. So I don't know why. What happened was I was sitting watching TV. We just recently had the anniversary of the moon landing and the Apollo program, and I thought, gee, I've got a rocket. That'd be really cool to build one. Ended up tracking down. There's a guy in Australia who actually does Atlas and Mercury rockets in 1/72 scale, Horizon Models. I bought his entire catalogue.
Nice.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
And the kits are really good, and it's very hard to come across rockets in 1/72 scale. There are a few out there, but they're very hard to sort of come by. Most of them are in smaller scales, like 1/44 scale, 1/400 scale, which is a bit of an odd one. Detail is extremely good actually for the scale that it's in, and let's face it, there's nothing else out there in this scale anyway, but they go together really well. The trouble with building a rocket is you've got nowhere to hide with that seam, so you've really got to pay a lot of attention to the seam and make sure that it completely disappears. But there's anybody who's built say a submarine or done an aircraft fuselage won't have any trouble with this. It's the kit goes together quite well. The kits, I should say, go together quite well. It's funny because I also bought I thought, well, if I'm buying a Mercury and if I've done the Redstone, I've done the Atlas or building the Atlas, I need to get the Apollo. And so I went and bought myself a Dragon 1/72 scale Apollo. Oh God, that's
wow, that is a big model.
I'm a constant scale builder, so all my ships are in 1/350 scale. All my armor is going to be in 1/35 scale. I like to put the models next to each other to get a size comparison, and you just don't realise how big the Apollo rocket is until you put it next to, say, a Mercury Redstone or an Atlas rocket. This thing is huge.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the photos on the bench site there on Facebook of some of those rockets. I haven't seen your Apollo, but those other two you mentioned, I've seen photos of those, and it looks like you're building a V2 as well.
Yeah, well, the V2 was sort of the first leading rocket, really, wasn't it? So I thought, I've got to do that as well. I think under Operation Paperclip, you guys took a whole lot of Germans back to the US after the Second World War, and they built a lot of V2 rockets, which was your basis for your sort of interballistic cruise missiles and also your space program. Von Braun was there.
Yeah.
And all the rest of it.
Yeah, Albert Einstein and Werner von Braun. And have you guys done any real space modeling? Is it something you're interested in?
I'll go ahead and jump in here, Doug. I am that little kid that was obsessed with rockets and the space shuttle forever, right? Like, it's one of my favorite things. And, I think that's a really underrepresented genre in modeling. I know there's some out there, but I do know that there's not really like a quality space shuttle kit, like a full with the boosters and the liquid fuel tank and the orbiter. I think there's maybe one full model, and from what I've seen, it's not the best. So yeah, I love real space and I like real space modeling. The only thing I've built is the Hasegawa Voyager space probe with the full photo etch set. I think it was from Edward, and it was really cool. I haven't painted it because I'm kind of nervous about painting all this photo etch because it's literally covered in photo etch, including the big, I think it was a 40-foot long boom that like sticks off the side of it. That's also photo etch I soldered and twisted a little bit. It doesn't have enough twist that it should, but it's close enough. Then I also have Dragon's 1/72nd scale moon landing kit that comes with the limb and the command module and like the little moon base. I bought that right when I was kind of really getting into kits, like right after I realized that like, I could actually build something other than a Warhammer kit. So I bought it and I opened it and I was like, this is way too hard for me. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So it's just been sitting on my shelf ever since. But when we had the 50th anniversary, I think it was last year, I got it out and I was like, I should really build this, and I did not, unfortunately. I want to one day because it is really cool. It's Apollo, so what's there not to love?
Yeah, exactly right. I've got a similar kit to that. I've got the Dragon with the Apollo approach, which was the command module and the LEM as it heads to the moon. And I'm actually planning. I've been working on how do you replicate that sort of gold look on it. And I've gone and bought myself some gold leaf to try and attach to it to see how that works. So that'd be an interesting little exercise.
Have you tried that?
That's really cool.
Have you tried it yet?
No, I haven't. But I mean, for goodness sake, they've been putting gold leaf on buildings for centuries and centuries, so it should work on plastic, shouldn't it?
That was kind of like one of my big hang-ups when I first opened it, and I was like looking at it and realized I'm like, that's right, this thing. I've seen the mock-up one at the Air and Space Museum. This thing's covered in like foil, right? I'm like, I don't know how to paint that. I don't have anything like that. I mean, back then, all I was using was water-based acrylics, so I was like, I don't know.
Yeah. You need to get that satellite painted too. That the photo etch will take the paint really easy. You shouldn't be afraid of that. Just dive in and do it.
Yeah, I want to because it's like 3 colors, so it's really not going to be that hard. But it's so cool. The Voyager looks awesome. I want to say I think Hasegawa also has a Hubble Space Telescope kit. I don't know if it can be found really anymore or how good it is, but I'd be interested in that too because the Hubble's awesome.
What scale was that in? Do you remember?
The Hubble?
Yeah.
Or the Voyager?
The Voyager.
Voyager is 1/48th.
See, wrong scale.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty small as 1/48th, so if it was 1/72nd, it'd be really tiny. I mean, like the 14-inch high gain antenna, I want to say on the kit, it's only, in real life, it was 14 feet. So in the kit, it's like a couple inches, if that. I mean, it's pretty small.
Yeah. Doug, any interest in real space subjects or any experience building those?
Definitely have some interest as far as experience. When I was 9 or 10 years old, my grandfather gave me a 144 scale Saturn V Apollo. At that age, even the way I butchered kits, I couldn't get that thing to work. It was too big for me. There was just too many things to go wrong for someone with no experience. But I had it, and it was impressive, even to me at the time. Yeah, I'd love to get my hands on something like that one of these days.
Any idea, Dave, what the finished dimensions of that rocket's going to be in 1/72nd scale? Is that, 3 feet tall? Is it taller than that? I mean, it's got to be big.
Oh, no, it stands pretty tall. I think it's touching 4 foot, to tell you the truth. I'd have to go back and check the dimensions in the box, but it's not far off that.
Someone at my IPMS club brought one in a couple years ago, and I want to say he had it. He didn't have it on the table. He had it like we have ours at a school, so we have like the school like cafeteria tables. You guys know, like with the benches attached to it. I think he had it sitting on the bench, so a little bit lower than the table, and it was taller than me. I'm 6 feet tall, and I had to look up to like look at the where the capsule is, and I was like, wow, that is really cool. I don't know where he puts it. I don't know where I would put mine if I had one, but yeah, that thing has got to be huge.
Yeah, it demands its own special display case once you've finished building it.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about in our last episode that we would discuss here is a discussion on paint. And today I think we want to talk about starting to lay a foundation, because it's such a huge subject. It's going to take, I would imagine, pieces of several different episodes. Let's talk about the different types of paint that we use specifically for airbrushing. It's very different, the types of paints that you're going to want to use for airbrushing versus regular paint brushing. They do different things, the different properties and everything. So yeah, let's talk about that. What I've done is I've broken down the paints that we use for airbrushing into several different types, and let's talk about each one of those. The first one is acrylics, and traditionally these paints are water or alcohol based. They're generally more environmentally friendly than other types of paint. So our listeners out there, if you live in an apartment or if you don't have access to a garage or a shed or somewhere where you can paint without infuriating your family members or people you cohabitate with, these might be a good solution for you. That's kind of the upside. The downside is they're usually harder to work with, pure acrylics, in an airbrushing setup. You get tip dry on most of these. It's consistently a problem, especially if you're in a dry climate. And the other thing is, where it's water based, a lot of time the finishes can be fragile on your model. So they might, as you're handling the model, maybe doing the weathering, you might get pieces of it that might flake off a little bit easier than some of the other types of paints that we'll talk about here in a moment. And then some of the examples of these are, to me, acrylics when you use their alcohol X28 thinner. MIG makes some of those. AK Ammo makes a large range of those. Vallejo makes the Model Air paints that are water-based and designed to be airbrushed. Mission Models is a new player in the market. I don't have any experience with those myself. And then Goons makes a Mr. Hobby Aqueous line that is water-based. So have you guys, any of you guys, do you use these just water-based acrylics in your airbrushing work?
I'll start. Sometimes. I prefer not to. As I've talked about before, when I started in the hobby, I started with Warhammer stuff, and in that realm, it's water-based acrylics or nothing. Games Workshop, Citadel paints are all water-based acrylics, so that's what I felt comfortable with. So when I decided to start airbrushing, I went with Vallejo Model Air, because that's what everyone on the internet and the forums and stuff said to use. So of course I bought pretty much the whole set, not all at once, because why save money when you could just buy them all separately and pay more money. So I've done that. I'll use them, because now that I've kind of moved past that into some of these other paints that we're going to talk about, I'm not going to throw them away. I spent a lot of money on them, and they're still perfectly fine, and you can use them with a brush, which helps too. But some of these like Vallejo paints and some other water-based acrylics, I don't have an equivalent for a paint that I would like, that I would prefer to airbrush, especially like skin tones and stuff like that, and just some of the more off the wall colors. I don't like using them, but I will. And if you know what you're doing and you take your time, they'll work. They're not as good as lacquers or some of these other ones, but I mean, they're not bad.
Doug, any experience with these water-based acrylics, airbrushing?
Other than when I tried using Tamiya paints with alcohol, rubbing alcohol, I tried that. It worked okay. The first time I tried switching from enamels to acrylics was the Model Master Acryl line, and oh my gosh, I'm shuddering. I'm shuddering while I talk. I mean, it's horrible.
Yes, safety tip for all you new modelers out there. Even if anyone gives you Model Master Acryl, run away very, very quickly, and maybe take up stamp collecting. Just seriously, stay away from that stuff. Dave, what's your experience been with airbrushing kind of traditional water-based acrylics?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the old Tamiya acrylics and also Guns as well. I haven't had any experience with mission models, and that's a fairly new range out at the moment, which I'm intrigued about. Vallejo, and I've got them sort of floating around. I sort of use them now if I just need to do a bit of touch-up brush painting more than anything. And still got a heap of the Guns around, a heap of the Tamiya around as well. But both of them spray so well. I tend to find the ones that are idiot-proof. That's the ones I aim for and use the most. I haven't got time to muck around trying to make different ratios or doing something to make the paint work better. My opinion is if you're spending this much money on paint, which, let's think about it, it's not that cheap per bottle. It should work first time every time. Yeah. Otherwise, it's going to end up in the well of tears.
Yep, exactly. That's a great point. And I think traditional acrylics are, where a lot of modelers that are new to the hobby can get very, very frustrated, like with mission models. And I'm just going to go on what I've heard. What I've heard is those paints spray very, very well, ... once you figure out the chemistry that's involved, because they do have issues with tip dry. They do have issues with being difficult to airbrush. In some climates, there's certain days that you can't airbrush them because it's either too humid or not humid enough, those kinds of things. And so for that reason, I don't really airbrush the water-based acrylics very often, just because, like you, my time is valuable. I want something that works and is bulletproof every time.
I will agree with what you said about using these water-based acrylics, and you see it like on the internet all the time. Oh, I tried to use this Vallejo paint and I couldn't get anything. And then everyone chimes in with their own magic recipe. Oh, well, you need 3 drops of thinner, and then you need 2 drops of water, and you need a drop and a half of flow improver. And then if you spin around in a circle 3 times to the left, then it works just fine.
Yeah, sacrifice a chicken to the gods. And,
I'm like, how about just go buy a bottle of Tamiya paint and some lacquer thinner, and you won't ever have to worry about it. It's really that easy.
Let's move on to enamel paint. There for a long time, I would say through the 1980s through probably the mid-2000s, these were really very popular with modelers. They're losing popularity now, and I think there's primarily 2 reasons. Number one, enamels have really long drying times, especially as compared to the acrylic lacquer hybrids, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Sometimes enamels can take days or even weeks to dry completely. And I think the other key here, and I want to make sure that we talk about this. The other reason why I think that enamels are losing popular as paint for your models is almost all of the new weathering products that are coming out from Ammo and AK and all of these, they are all enamel based. And when you weather, you want to weather with a dissimilar material than you painted with, because the last thing you want to do is put the same type of weathering medium over your paint, because it'll just eat into the paint job. You can always barrier coat it, but those are extra steps to do that. And so because of that, I think that's a big reason why they're not as popular. The 2 big manufacturers, at least here in the States, and Dave, maybe you can talk to this, of enamel paints were Testors, and then from England, Humbrol, and they are either phasing out or have phased out almost all of their enamel paint lines for modelers. That's kind of the ins and out. I think they're easy to use overall, but again, their drying time and then the fact that they have the same chemistry as weathering products is what's making those not popular. What's your experience been, Dave?
I haven't actually used Testors before, but when I first sort of discovered modeling as a kid, Humbrol was the only thing you could get your hands on. trying to open those stupid little tins with a screwdriver, you'd end up with half the paint spilled. Or when you did actually open it up, you'd find everything dry inside to like a little desiccated sort of bit of pigment. I've never been a huge fan of enamels, and although I do still have a few enamels, which was from a specialty manufacturer, White Ensign model, to deal in particular colour chips for warships that are hard to come by. That's about the only enamels I've got left.
Yeah, Dave over at Plastic Model Mojo is a huge enamel fan, and I guess White Ensign Models is now a company called Color Coats, and he still uses enamels to spray his aircraft with.
Yeah, well, with Dave, there's no accounting for good taste. So.
You guys still use enamels, or have you kind of moved away from them? Where are you guys at?
It's been a long time. Since I gave up the Model Master enamels, I switched over to the hybrids, and I've been happy ever since. I just have no desire to go back.
TJ, do you use them?
I have used enamel paints one time in my life, and it was a very, very particular reason for it. I was filling in the stamp marks on a receiver on a firearm. That was literally the only reason why I own some, because I thought it would look cool, put a little paint in there, liven it up, and I read on the internet that's how to do it. It worked, and then I threw those enamels away because I was like, well, I'm not going to use these ever. So yeah, I've never painted a model with them, like straight enamel, other than like enamel weathering products. So yeah, I can't really speak to that one. I might be a little too young for that one.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. I like Doug, I used to use the Testors enamels, the Model Master line, for a long time. Never the Humbrol, and it was, Dave, you mentioned it and we kind of laughed, but it's true. I hated those tins. I mean, it was so hard to get the paint in and out of those tins, the way that the lids were on them. It was just a pain in the ass, and so I just never wanted to use them because of that.
Oh, I know it.
But we'd airbrush a model aircraft in enamel, and we'd set it on the bench to wait for the paint to dry, and 2 weeks later you could still smell it off gassing. It didn't dry. And then, like I mentioned before, with all the weathering products I'm using, I use oil paint washes that are thinned with mineral spirits, and the pre-made weathering products that are all enamel based. Yeah, I just don't paint with them anymore. So I would say we're all kind of on the same page there. We're going to talk about now true lacquers. There really aren't many true lacquers that are being used for modeling. There's some specialty manufacturers like Scalecoat does a lot of true lacquer paints for model railroad subjects. The thing about true lacquers is they have a really nice bite into the plastic, and that can be good and bad. The good part of that is they're going to be really durable, and they're going to bite into that plastic, and you're not going to be able to rub them off or chip them off. But the downside of that is I've seen modelers use these products and actually damage the plastic. A lot of lacquers are used in automotive paint and those types of things. Most spray paints in the past were true lacquers. The Model Master sprays, the Tamiya sprays, a lot of those are still lacquers. And then now Tamiya is coming out with, for airbrushing, a new series of true lacquer paints called the LP series. Dave, you've got some experience with those, don't you?
Oh my God! I swear, as the paint's coming out of the end of the airbrush, you can almost hear a choir singing in the background. That's how beautiful this stuff is. Dries quickly. It is. If you can get it in the US, definitely have a crack at it, because it is the most gorgeous paint to actually spray with, apart from another one which we'll talk about later. But it just goes down gorgeous, dries super quick. You've got to use the actual Tamiya LP thinner with it. I wouldn't recommend sort of using anything else, but it just sprays beautifully. You
guys use true lacquers on your models?
Never ever.
No, I don't think I have. I mean, maybe like some Tamiya. I think they have lacquer spray paint, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
I think I've used some of that before. That's as close as I've ever gotten. I am looking forward to the LP series, which, I don't think they're available in the US yet. They might be. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But
well, the last category, which I think most of us are going to be, using, are what I'm going to call hybrids. They're acrylic lacquer. So you've got acrylic paint, but rather than being water-based or alcohol-based, like the true kind of traditional acrylics are. These are thinned with lacquer, and they become really, really popular in just the last 5 to 10 years. The number of manufacturers that are using these and the number of lines that have sprung up has been really tremendous. So, you've got MRP from Central Europe, which is great. From Dave's neck of the woods, you have SMS acrylic lacquers. The Goons Mr. Hobby paints are acrylic lacquers. The AK Real Color acrylic lacquers, which TJ, Doug, and I really are big fans of. And then the Tamiya acrylics can be thinned with either Tamiya's lacquer thinner or other lacquer thinners like the Goons leveling thinner. So those are all examples of those. But acrylic lacquers are really wonderful. Now, the downside of the acrylic lacquer is they tend to really, really smell. They have very strong perfumes. They're not as friendly on the environment. You need to make sure, especially you new modelers, that you're using safety equipment. We use spray booths, and I think we all have ventilator masks as well. And you want to spray those in an area that isn't going to offend, again, the people that you live with in your house, because they can be very, very strong. But other than that, the upside is they're wonderful. They're almost, to use Dave's term, they're almost black magic. They're almost foolproof. They spray very, very thin. They atomize really nicely, and they dry almost instantly. I mean, you can be painting an aircraft and paint one wing, and by the time you go to paint the other wing, the first wing's already dry. I mean, they're really fantastic products. What's your experience been on these, Dave?
Pretty much used all of them. By far my favorite ones at the moment, which I've got a lot of now, is the SMS paint range, and also still got a lot of Tamiya acrylics. The SMS ones are great. They're straight out of the bottle. You don't have to do any mixing at all. And particularly the guys who do a lot of Warhammer stuff and sci-fi stuff. The SMS paints have a huge range of pearl colours and colour shifts and crystal pearls, and for some reason all the sci-fi guys seem to sort of wet their pants over that, and they're just lapping it up. And it's perfect for doing those really oddball sort of kits. But yeah, Guns, I've got that. It's a staple, and same with Hataka range. I haven't had much success with it. For some reason, it doesn't seem to work down here. It's because we're some part of the world or something, I don't know. But as I said, the SMS is straight out, and it works first time every time. I've got no complaints at all.
My go-to is AK Real Color. I talked about that in the last episode when John was asking me about the Sherman that I built. I had been using them often before that, but I think that might have been the first 35th scale, fairly large kit that I built and painted with just pretty much AK Real Color. And thinning it with Mr. Leveling Thinner, it is amazing. I like MRP. I have a handful of colors. I like their Russian 4BO green. It's
great.
It's probably the best, Russian 4BO, which is a dark green. I don't know why everyone thinks it's like some bright apple green, but it's not. It's dark green, and
exactly.
Theirs is fantastic. I did a ISU 152 that I never finished, and then my cat knocked off the shelf last week, so that one might not ever be finished.
That was a good looking model.
This is why you don't have cats.
Yeah, well, I've got 3 of them, and only one of them's ever the problem.
My pets never knock a model off the shelf, I'll tell you what.
And I also, so I went from water-based acrylics to Tamiya to everything else, the MRP and AK Real Color. So I have almost the entire range of Tamiya paints too, which thanks to Scale Modelers Critique Group on Facebook, I learned to thin it with Mr. Leveling Thinner. So now that's the only thing I thin it with, and I use a fair amount of Tamiya thin with Mr. Leveling Thinner too, and it's really good. I do like that.
Doug, what do you use?
Mostly Tamiya and AK Real Color. I've given Mr. Paint MRP a chance, and it's wonderful stuff. It takes quite a few coats to get it to get the level of paint that I want on there, but because I don't thin that, I can't stretch it out as much as I can the others. I can take a Tamiya paint or an AK Real Color jar, and thinning it down with as many coats as I tend to put on a kit, I can make that last a long, long time. I prefer the Real Color because of their color selection, but usually when I do my Star Wars kits, every one of them has a slightly different shade of gray. You probably can't tell by the awful pictures I post. But what I do is I start with Tamiya flat white, and I add tiny bits of black or sky gray and maybe a little deck tan till I get that shade of gray that I really like for that particular ship. And then that's what I use. So every time, every model I start with a bottle of Tamiya flat white and turn it into whatever color I want. Because Tamiya doesn't have a good range of really light grays.
But luckily for most, especially in armor modeling, there's somebody out there that has compiled whatever nationality you like to model. Someone has a good list of how to make whatever color you need. I know, like for British World War II armor, Mike Starmer, I think that's how you say his last name. He has Tommy mixes for every SSC color and all the other colors that the British Army used, because they had quite a few that are probably as close as you can get. And I'm sure there's some others out there, but as a British World War II armor fan, that's who to go to. So it's kind of a pain, but it's not too bad. If you're doing like a couple of tanks, you can mix up a bottle of it. That way you have, like, I made a SEC 2 brown bottle off of his, so a little extra step, but it gives you a nice color.
The one thing that the acrylic lacquer hybrids are not generally very good at is brush painting. And so if you want to buy a paint that's equally as good for brush painting as it is for airbrushing, most of these aren't going to be that solution for you. So that might be something to keep in mind. Hopefully that's helpful for everybody. We'll be talking more about the other aspects of painting, the episodes coming up. So we look forward to that. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful to kind of divide those up into the types of paint that are out there. And if you're new, kind of wondering what you might want to get, maybe that'll help you make your decisions on those types of products. How about hobby shop shout outs? Did we get any in since last episode?
We absolutely did. The hobby shop shout outs. I would like to ask first, Dave, do you have any specific of your 150 hobby stores in your area? Do you have any one in particular that you especially love, or are there just a number of them?
Oh, there's just a number of them. Each one has different sort of specialties and things that they do. And so, Nachi, if you asked me to pick one to take away in a desert island, I'd be hard pressed.
Right. And you don't want to offend the rest of them, right?
Well, that's right. Yeah, I'm fairly well known here, so I've got to be fairly even-handed across the entire spread.
Absolutely.
Okay,
all
so
right.
Dave wants to shout out the entire country of Australia, all the hobby shops.
All the hobby
stores.
stores.
They're all great.
Steve Schaefer, he was our first responder. He said, we're lucky enough here in the Twin Cities to have two great hobby shops. First is the Scale Model Supplies in St. Paul, Minnesota. They're in the basement of a building in a space that used to be a bowling alley. They have one of the largest stocks of kits I've ever seen in a great train section. We also have Hub Hobby with 2 locations in Richfield, Minnesota and Little Canada, Minnesota. They have more of a focus on RC, but have one of the biggest stocks of Gunpla outside of Japan. Dana Michi says B&B Hobbies in Spokane, that's Spokane, Washington, has been in business since 1965 with a huge selection and an awesome staff. B&B is a great place to get lost in. I've been a customer here since a child and always check with them before looking elsewhere. If you ever make it to Spokane in the eastern Washington state, be sure to stop and get lost amongst the boxes of styrene. Let's see, we've got one more that's dropped since we first talked. Paul Castro, a shout out to Airworks in Adelaide, South Australia. Craig has a wide variety of plastic kits and supplies and is always willing to order anything extra you want, but could not find it. He has a special 10% discount for all members of a local club, the SAPMA, South Australian Plastic Modelers Association. And last but not least, this may not be a local hobby shop, but our friend Warren Starrett says there just aren't any options in Northern Ireland anymore. So he would like to shout out the Scale Model Shop in the UK is second to none. Yeah, that's a mail order shop.
Well, I think we're kind of coming to the end here. We've kept Dave captive for quite a while. We really appreciate his willingness to sit in with us. It's been a good time here. So TJ, what should we talk about in our next episode?
In our next episode, we're going to continue on painting and maybe talk about some brush painting, maybe some brush painting techniques, what paint works good for brush painting, which we kind of already touched on, but there's a little bit more to it than just sticking your paintbrush in a pot of paint and slapping it on a model. So we'll probably get into that and look look forward to having another guest interview and some quality discussion.
We're still looking for listener feedback. Become a member of the posse. We'll share that feedback on every episode.
Dave, before you go, one other question. What's it like working with Ian and Julian?
They're a great couple of guys, those two. You got Ian is just like you hear him in the show. He's actually an old headbanger, or metal sort of music guy from way back, and he's just such a funny guy. And Julian is exactly what you'd expect him to be, very sort of dry. He's got this sort of underlying wicked sense of humour that is extremely subtle. So it's quite amusing that the way they work together.
That's awesome.
Listener feedback. Become a member of the posse. We're going to share that feedback on every episode. Maybe not all of it, but as many as we can squeeze in. You might be on a future podcast with us. We want to hear from you. Tell us what you like, what questions you have for us and other podcast members, suggestions. Hey, tell us what your favorite hockey team is. Please. And whatever you think is cool. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again.
Awesome. And again, you can leave that feedback on our Facebook page, Plastic Posse Podcast, or if email's more your speed, you can hit us at plasticpossepodcast@gmail.com. Keep, as Doug and TJ said, keep giving us that feedback. Post some pictures of your builds or your figures. We love to see that, and I think it really makes the site a lot of fun. I want to give a shout out to On the Bench. They've got a great Facebook page as well. Dave and the guys do a great job keeping their kind of listeners up to date on what projects they're doing. And then Plastic Model Mojo and Scale Model Podcast, they have good Facebook pages as well where you can catch up with them and their listeners and see what they're up to. We want you guys to continue to support those other podcasts and keep listening. There's plenty of content, and hopefully you guys have already listened to those podcasts before you found us. So anyway, one other last bit of business. If you wouldn't mind, whatever content provider that you're using to listen to podcasts, if you would leave us a rating, especially if you can leave us a 5-star rating, that's going to help our podcast reach more listeners, be more searchable by those different content providers, be it Apple or Google or Spotify or whatever that you're using. And so we'd really appreciate that. That would kind of help us as well. And anyway, Dave, one more time, thank you so much for sitting in. We've been big fans of yours for a long time, and it's been a lot of fun being able to talk with you.
Oh, thanks guys. It's been a real pleasure being on your show.
Well, awesome.
Yeah,
and if there's anything we can do to help make that episode 100 great, be sure and let us know. And in the meantime, we'll be listening to those future episodes and waiting to hear what kind of content you're going to bring us in the coming week.
No dramas. You'll definitely be getting the call.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, TJ, Doug, as always, thanks a lot, you guys. I can't wait to look at episode 3 in a couple of weeks, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
All right. Take care.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by.